Okay, so welcome to everyone who's here for this live conversation, which is a very important and timely conversation on the topic of book banning. So before I bring on our guests, I thought it might be helpful to lay kind of the groundwork or provide some context for this topic. And I'd like to start by reading a statement by PEN America. So PEN America is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to raise awareness for the protection of free expression in the United States and worldwide. And this is what it says. Today, books are under profound attack in the United States. They are disappearing from library shelves, being challenged in droves, and being decreed off limits by school boards, legislators, and prison authorities. And everywhere, it is the books that have long fought for a place on the shelf that are being targeted. Books by authors of color, by LGBTQ plus authors, by women, books about racism, about sexuality, gender, history. Book bans in public schools have recurred throughout American history, with notable flare-ups in the McCarthy era and the early 1980s. But while long present, the scope of such censorship has expanded drastically and in unprecedented fashion since the beginning of the 2021-2022 school year. And I just want to give you an idea of the statistics. I'm going to share my screen here. So according to PEN America's Banned in the USA report, since the fall of 2021, PEN America has counted over 10,000 book bans in schools across the country. In the 2022-2023 report, PEN America found 3,362 instances of individual books banned, affecting 1,557 unique titles. This represents an increase of 33% from the 2021-2022 school year. The bans occurred in 33 states, with Florida leading the nation. So, one other thing I just wanted to highlight, more recent data, 2024 data, shows that the majority of book censorship attempts are now originating from organized movements. Pressure groups and government entities that include elected officials, board members, and administrators initiated 72% of demands to censor books in schools and public libraries. And in fact, only 16% of those requests were from parents, and 5% of challenges were brought by individual library users. So, that just gives you kind of a context, I think, for our conversation today and sort of how vital it is to start talking about this and raising more awareness around it. So I am going to bring on Amanda Charles here to join us. Hi, Amanda. Can you unmute yourself?
Oh, there we go. Okay,
There
I'm
you go.
muted.
Hi.
Okay. Hi.
Lovely to have you.
It's good to be here.
Thank you for coming. I just want to give people a little background on who you are. So just hang on for a second.
Okay.
Amanda Charles is the librarian 3 at Teenscape, which is the Department for Teens ages 12 through 19 in the Los Angeles Public Library's Central Library. As a specialist young adult librarian, Amanda makes system-wide order sheets for graphic novels and, is it manga?
Yes.
Manga. And curates Teenscape's collections of manga, graphic novels, and nonfiction. In her 6 years at Teenscape, Amanda estimates that she has purchased over 6,000 books for the department. Not one of those books has ever been banned in the Los Angeles Public Library system. So you and I first met, I don't know if you remember, I was on a panel at the LA Public Library's Indie Fest. And you gave me a tour of Teenscape And I remember being struck by this table that you have in the middle of uh, the that library section that features, or at that time featured, banned books. Do you still have that table?
Yes, we always have our banned books display because people always are trying to ban books. And, here at Los Angeles Public Library, we're very fortunate in the community that we serve. We don't ban books, we celebrate them. Generally, when a book is banned somewhere else, like when Genderqueer, which was the most banned book of 2022 and 2023, was top of the list from the ALA list of banned books. I had to order four more copies. When Mouse was banned by a school district in Tennessee, I had to order four more copies. The general response to book bans in my communities is to circle the wagon and protect the books. And as a librarian, I am really fortunate. We all who work in this community are really fortunate to do that. But yeah, we are always celebrating the books, the voices that are challenged, the books that maybe other people don't want you to read, because those are strong voices that need to be heard.
Absolutely. Um, I was just wondering how, like, have you encountered at the Los Angeles Public Library instances where people have challenged a book?
So it happens. I understand from our youth services department. So we're a big system. We're really fortunate in that we have a lot of supports in place. Like when if a book is challenged, like it's not up to me to be like, yes, no, I deal with it all on my own. We have a whole bunch of people who we have a system where the patron fills out a report, it goes for review, the patron gets responded to, the decisions, like the book is reviewed, the decisions are made, like it goes through a whole process. So as I understand from our youth services department that handles requests for reconsideration, which is what we call a challenge to a book, there have been 15 formal and informal challenges. So since 2022, which is not a lot considering what's happening elsewhere in the country. And informal is maybe somebody saying, I don't like this book. I don't think you should have it for kids, or you should have it in the library. And then the librarian says, would you like to file a written request for reconsideration? And the person would say, no, I don't feel like it. So
Okay.
like the informal challenge is really just somebody saying like, I don't think it should be here, but then not following up on it. So yeah, we haven't had a whole lot of those. And generally, like when we do, we have a lot of systems and supports in place to help us out. Um,
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and then a formal challenge. Good. Can you just walk us through the process of what actually happens? So, a formal
yes.
challenge, what is the process of that?
So the challenge is input in writing and submitted to the library for review by librarians. So every book that is on the shelf at your local library has been selected by librarians. And we all have to go to school for an additional 2 years. We get a graduate degree, a master's degree in library studies or library science in order to make those decisions about the books that are on the shelf in your library. So every single book on the shelf has been selected by a librarian, reviewed by a librarian, touched by a librarian, and placed on that shelf for your community by your librarians who know your community and know how to select books. When a patron makes a request that a book be removed or moved from one section of the library to another, and this is what's happening with a lot of material for children and for young adults, is they're requesting it be moved to an adult department. That request is what's called a challenge. So most of the statistics that we're hearing from Pen America and the American Library Association, that's ALA, include challenges and bans together. So books are banned or challenged. The challenge is that request to remove the book. And then the ban, if it's banned, that is when the book is actually moved or removed from the library. So there are a lot fewer bans than there are challenges, but recently, especially in school libraries, there have been a lot of bans happening.
Mm-hmm. What is, I mean, to your mind, I know you're a librarian, a book professional at a library, but do you have an opinion like how it might be different in a school environment to challenge a book versus in a library?
In a public library versus a school. So I think that, uh, I think that there has been a lot of action politically around schools and school boards that really hasn't kind of drifted into public libraries yet. I think it's definitely happening more that public library materials are challenged, that books for children and books for young adults are challenged. But I think it's the idea that the books in a school library are there expressly for children and young adults. Here at the public library, about 50% of the people who read young adult fiction are adults.
Mhm.
This collection is for everybody. It's a young adult collection, but a lot of different people read it. Kids who are reading above their grade level elementary school kids may read in the teen section. Adults who just enjoy a good story, that may be about a teen protagonist will read in the teen section. The public library collection is for everyone, but the school library collection is expressly for the students of that school. And so I think that people who feel protective or concerned about what kids are reading, that really shows up in schools, and they really get a lot of focus and attention because that collection is expressly for children and teens.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that that may just be it.
And who then is it primarily library users who are challenging the books at in the on library shelves? Is that where are you getting are libraries getting these sort of entities
So I've
coming?
been with Los Angeles Public Library in for 11 going on 12 years, and no patron has ever approached me to challenge a book. This is not something that comes in my experience. Like my community, when they see my banned books display, they say, "Great, keep it up. We want
Mhm.
more." That's what I get. That's the feedback I get from my community. I know other places we read these news reports about who's doing the challenging. You had the statistics from Pen America that it's organized online via various action groups. I think Moms for Liberty is a big one. And I know I've read this in ALA publications and various library news outlets. They circulate lists of books. And so a lot of times, these books that are constantly being challenged and are being banned in schools and public libraries, it's on a list from an organization, and the people who are doing the challenging haven't read the book. A lot of the time, the people doing the challenging haven't read the book. It's just there's something in it that they can point to. Congressmen are reading sections of books like out loud on the floor of Congress. They're taking things out of context and they're pointing to this and they're saying this one thing is the reason why the entirety of this book should not be on the shelf in the library.
Pretty amazing. And just disconcerting. Um, so how do you see I want to bring Julia on, but I just want to just get a sense first of kind of how you see your role as a book professional and yeah, your kind of role in I think putting my sense of it would be connecting readers with the books that the right books for them.
So in library school, we learn about the concept of providing our readers with mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. A mirror is to see themselves reflected in our collection. So we want all of our readers, all of our young readers, to see themselves, see stories about queer kids, see stories about kids of color, see stories about kids with disabilities, neurodivergent kids. We want all of those stories reflected on ourselves. We want that to be a mirror so that they see themselves reflected. But we also want books to be a window into another experience that maybe we haven't had. And it builds empathy and helps young people relate to others who are different from them. And then also, lastly, books can be a doorway. They can be an entry into a world that you didn't know existed. Something that maybe you have wondered about. Now you have somebody who has experience, who is talking about that thing. So mirrors, windows, and doors. And so that's our goal for our collection is for it to provide this vast range of experience, both to reflect the experiences of our patrons, but also to build empathy and provide a way to relate across our diverse communities. So as a librarian, I am always looking for books that diversify our shelves. I am always looking for new experiences, cultural diversity. Just I want my collection to be as broad and wide ranging as possible. I never want a kid to come to my shelves and not find a story that reflects their experience on it. I always want them to have that. So, we are ordering books every single month. We are looking through thousands, tens of thousands of books every single year to select the books that go on our shelves. And this diversity, this reflection of the experience, um, of our patrons is foremost in our mind whenever we're making our selections.
And I remember you mentioned that on Instagram, was it last year, you shared kind of a selection of diverse books
Mhm.
on Instagram, and you got a comment. I think that someone attacking you as a groomer.
Yeah, so that's pretty common on social media these days. My colleague and I, we were sharing books for March, which is Women's History Month, and we were celebrating books that reflect the experiences of women and non-binary people and in history and in the present. And I think she shared the book Fox Maidens, which I think I had right here, but I said it somewhere, which is a graphic novel set in Korea, in ancient Korea, about a main character who has adventures and is also a lesbian, and it's a great story. And then I shared a nonfiction graphic novel called Liberated about Claude Caha, who is a non-binary artist in 1920s Paris, and then also was active against the Nazis during World War II. And for that, for sharing the fact that these books exist and that they're good books, somebody in the comments decided to call us groomers. Yeah. You know, uh, I find it really interesting that if you look at the list of the most banned books, I think I have the ALA list for the most banned books. The top two, it's not genderqueer again this year, which is a graphic novel memoir. But the top one is All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. It's a memoir. The second one is Genderqueer, which is also a memoir. And then also on the list is Flamer, which is semi-autobiographical. And these are they're all stories of LGBTQIA people. And in the case of All Boys Aren't Blue and Flamer, authors of color. And so these are stories that are true, that people object to these true stories being told. These are stories that teens who are looking for their experience reflected in real life can read and feel like, oh, there is another person out there who is going through what I'm going through. And there are people trying to ban these stories so that those teens don't get access to this like true material. And I think, especially for this audience, for memoir writers, it's really important to tell your story. It's really important to write your memoir and get that story out there because just showing that your experience exists, can be a window for people who haven't been through it, but can be a mirror, a life-saving mirror for people who have had similar experiences. And so, this is why we celebrate banned books. It's because they tell diverse stories that need to be told. And so we have all of these books on the shelf here in my department in Teenscape, and we plan to keep them there.
Oh my gosh. It's like a manifesto. Thank you so much for saying that. And I think it's a perfect entree to bring Julia on here. Julia Scheeres, let me bring you here, add you to our group. Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, I can. Yeah. So,
So I just want to shout out Amanda. That was an amazing presentation, and I love that she is a public librarian with such a strong stance in fighting the good fight. That was really heartwarming to hear her speak. So thank you, Amanda.
yeah, I second that. It was really moving. So Julia, let me just let them sort of give a little bio intro to you
Oh, sure.
and your book that is sort of in the spotlight here in all the ways. So Julia Scheeres is the New York Times bestselling author of Jesus Land, a memoir, She's also written A Thousand Lives, a narrative history of the Jonestown tragedy, and Listen World, a biography of intrepid Hearst columnist Elsie Robinson. In addition to writing, she teaches narrative nonfiction and memoir through Stanford Continuing Studies and works privately with clients on manuscripts. So Jesusland, which is kind of this her memoir, which has been targeted by organizations and effectively banned. I just want to share just a little snippet of what it's about. At the heart of it is a true story about a teenage white sister and her adopted Black brother who struggle to maintain their close relationship amidst their harsh Christian fundamentalist home and hostile community. They both dream of going to Florida to be free in a diverse environment, which is kind of ironic given that Florida is like the number one home of banned books.
Number one hater of my book. Yeah.
So according to PEN America's 2022-2023 book banning report, Jesusland was banned from libraries and classrooms in Florida and Utah. So I'm just curious, like, I have so many questions for you, but for starters, like, how do you learn that your book is being challenged? Like, do people, I mean, do people reach out to you directly?
So I think it's been challenged in like 7 to 9 states by now, but they're all just small school districts within the 50 states, right? So I just get a news alert and it pops up on a regular basis. And there's a group that Amanda mentioned, the Moms for Liberty, who is behind most of these bans. And as she said, they pass these lists of books around that they want to ban or suppress. They don't read them. They just share the list with different chapters in other states. And then those women go to the school boards and try to get them banned.
Got it. And then what is your, if any, response? Like, do you take action, or how does that work from an author's perspective?
Well, there are 2 groups that I'm active in. One is PEN America, which is fighting these book bans. And then there's a new group called Authors Against Book Bans that just formed, I think, within the last year. And so Authors Against Book Bans is more of, hey, there's a bill in this state trying to ban any books that reference sex at all. For example, there was one in Texas recently where somebody introduced a bill.
Wow.
Right? So just writing letters to politicians and writing school board members, trying to kind of tone down the hysteria a little bit by talking about the book and why diverse views and opinions are important. And I wanted to share this. So I was just before the meeting doing a little research on Moms for Liberty, and it's more than a person's sexuality. It's also, they flag books that have quote unquote inflammatory racial commentary. What does that mean? Or controversial religious commentary, or alternate gender ideologies. So basically, any books that don't fit their very conservative viewpoint of how the world should operate, they want them banned. I was also going to share this. Last week, the New York State Commissioner of Education dismissed a case. There was a school district where the Moms for Liberty were attacking 5 books, including Jesusland. And they ruled that school boards cannot remove books simply because they dislike the ideas, which, that's what this comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So I just, it makes me frustrated. Also, it's a 20-year-old book now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
My book is published 20 years ago. So the fact that they're seeking it out, I think there's a lot of reasons they dislike it. It's about a young white girl in rural Indiana who is questioning the religious fundamentalism that she grew up in, religious hypocrisy. She is witnessing. This is the cover. That's me and my brother. So it's about our relationship. It's calling out the racism that he experienced. So ostensibly, they're trying to ban it for a couple sections where there is some sexuality. But as Amanda says, they're doing it without context. So there's one scene that they like to copy and paste on the internet, and it's about me, the protagonist, as a teen being coerced into a sexual relationship by a teenage boy. And these are important issues. They're crucial issues that teenagers know about. We can't pretend they're not happening because we don't want to address them. We want to pretend they don't exist. And that's my biggest issue with book bans is that, aside from trying to silence voices that are different, like Amanda said, also, there's a lot of issues in here that I think will generate important conversations about what it's like to be a teenager in America, right? The influences and pressures, especially that teenage girls are facing.
Absolutely. And so many different kinds. I mean, your story brings together a lot of different relevant topics for teenagers. So I was reading something that you wrote, that you mentioned that you have received hundreds of emails from young readers, many from conservative Christian homes who were struggling with the fallout from child abuse, incest, racism, rape, addiction.
Right.
I mean, so what happens then when stories like yours are banned? It's like these kids are writing you saying what? That you give them hope, I'm imagining, that you.
Right. So one thing I did is I'm from Indiana. So in my hometown newspaper, I published an op-ed about the efforts to ban my book at different Indiana school districts. And I quote that, and I quote a 16-year-old girl who wrote me. I have the op-ed up here. And she wrote, if you were able to push through all the bullshit that people put in your way, I think I will be able to as well.
Gives me
Right.
chills.
But I mean, I think it's important. Like they're seeing an adult who made it through the other side of a harrowing childhood or teenage years, right? I mean, it gives them hope. So,
Yeah, and particularly, I mean, your story is extreme in a lot of ways, and yet I think fundamentally dealing with a lot of, relatable, maybe they're not in a Christian reform school in the Dominican, but they're dealing with racism, they're dealing with sexual abuse, they're dealing with bullying, sexual coercion, sort of these.
right. I mean, what's more
Common.
dangerous to the conservative Christian, moms for liberty than a young woman who thinks for herself, right? Who has her own opinions, who calls out wrongdoing and racism and things that are going on in her community, right? So, and as far as one thing these inflammatory tactic these groups do is they will go to the school board meetings and, as Amanda said, they will stand in front of the microphone and read like a short passage that contains sex. So taken completely out of context at a school board meeting, there'll be some grandma in a tracksuit reading these very salacious texts, and it's bizarre, right? And they're trying to make people uncomfortable, and they're trying to force the school board's hand, but without the context, I mean, it says nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And my argument is that teenagers these days, they're not reading books to find the blue parts like I might have done when I was a teenager, when they have, the internet porn in their hands, right? They have it's kind of a joke. It's an
Right.
excuse to ban viewpoints that they don't agree with. You know, they lean into the sexuality and the grooming aspect, which is complete bullshit.
So what is your, I mean, do you, because I know some schools do have it as part of their reading lists for the year. It's not just in their libraries, right? Like it's assigned reading, correct? Like your book?
Yeah.
And how do you, I mean, what's your take on that? Because I've been reading a little bit about that, just how you handle, families who might not want a book on their kids' reading list, and where is the line with that?
You know, I think that the job of educators and librarians, especially once you hit the teenage years, is to broaden a child's worldview.
Mm,
Like read experiences about people who are vastly different than you, different backgrounds. Maybe they're immigrants, maybe they're gay, maybe they're atheists or whatever. You know, it's just that is the beauty of our educational system, right? Is hopefully to create empathetic, open-minded people.
mm,
So, you know, I hope when they read Jesus Land, they can think twice about, you know, what it would be like to, you know, to be in the shoes of my brother David, who went through a lot of, you know, hard times just because of the color of his skin,
mhm, mm.
right?
Yeah. Um, so I'm just curious well, when you were writing this, just kind of to dip into your own writing process, were you aware that you were writing something controversial? I mean, was that something that you were,
Yeah.
did you feel empowered writing it? What was your,
Not at all. I wrote memoir for the reason most people write memoirs, because they have to get the story out. They have to get it off of their chest, right? They just have to pull it out and examine it and have it on the page. And, you know, I don't want to spoil the ending, but I wrote this for my brother David, because he was unable to write about his experiences. And I think after I escaped Indiana and the place where I lived, and I came out to the Bay Area where I live now, and I became a journalist, I just realized it gave me the perspective I needed to think, you know what, that was a really crappy situation that we went through, you know, and just feeling really angry and wanting to immortalize him in a way and his experience. So that's why I wrote the book. But you know, when you're writing memoir, you have blinders on. You're just trying to get the story on the page. You're not like thinking about
mm,
who's going to read it, or you know, that in 20 years there's going to be this group that completely hates your book. I mean, who knew, you know?
mhm.
So
Was there any backlash, like in a more intimate way, your intimate circles? Like, I don't, were your parents alive when it
hmm.
was published? And
Oh yeah, you know, it's anybody who writes a memoir is going to get backlash in some way, because you're setting yourself up as the family historian in a way, like this is the way it happened.
mhm,
So I have two older sisters and who are still, you know, religious, and I just told them like, well, this was my experience, you know, and each of us has a right to write about our experiences. If you know, they wanted to write about their experiences growing up in the family, which was completely different, and they could have done it.
mhm,
And there's a great Annie Lamott quote that some of you may already know that, you know, if people didn't want you to write about them, they should behave better.
mhm. There you
So
go.
I love that.
I do too. She's great to she's a great cheerleader for all things memoir. Um,
Yeah.
so okay. I just, I mean, again, from kind of a more craft perspective, if you don't mind me veering off a little bit
No,
from the book banning. I mean, I just, you're a stunning writer. And
no, thank you.
I, I'm really struck by, in fact, we talked about it in the workshop this week, like your vivid and compelling scene work. I mean, it's so cinematic. It's no surprise that it's being made into a movie. I think you just write visually. And I was just wondering from a memoir perspective, how you were able to create such or reimagine such specificity because, from the dialogue, I mean, just the specificity is
Right.
like jumps off the page. And it being you sort of writing, obviously, when you were, so much younger. How did you do that? And how do you teach that when you are working with memoir
Right.
students?
Well, memoir is a strange beast. It's somewhere between fiction and reportage. So, like I tell my students, you can't make things up, but obviously you're not going to remember dialogue
Right.
from something that happened 30 years ago. I don't even remember my conversation with my husband this morning, right?
Right.
But to have vivid scenes, you have to recreate dialogue, and you might have to recreate, small details to make a scene come alive. And so there's this thing called representational details. So, for example, I might not remember what I was wearing on the first day that we started class at our new high school, but I knew what was in my wardrobe. I knew my mom refused to buy me the trendy Lacoste polo shirts, and I had to wear the Kmart Swan, or so you're able to piece the story together in a way that's true, but it's not reportage. This isn't like
Right.
some dry journalistic endeavor. This is, important to bring the story in live. And what's the most important is to bring the relationships, right, and the theme alive.
And the emotional truth of the moment,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or like the idea of like, well, you could have been wearing that day. Like you don't know if you were definitely wearing that specific
Yeah.
outfit, but like you could have been wearing that,
You knew
right?
what was in your wardrobe.
Right.
Like I said, I knew what my mother refused to buy me, so I couldn't fit in with the popular kids because everything was, like Gore Vidal uses the status details, what people wear, the brands, and all of that. I was like unstatus
Right.
all the way, no status.
So it sounds like even from hearing Amanda talk, like the minute a book is banned, like the sales skyrocket. I mean, she's like, "Oh, I heard a book was banned, and now I'm going to buy 4 copies of the book." We've, sort of added to the shelves. Did you find that with Jesus Land? Like it got more popular, like with the sort of
I mean,
resistance against it,
they're doing me a great favor,
right?
right? It's like in the news in a lot of different places. I mean, it's fantastic press. Maybe it'll get people curious. And like you said, there's a movie coming out as well. Um, I mean, honestly, you can buy my books for a couple of dollars on Amazon's second, in the marketplace. So it's not definitely not making me rich, but it's amusing, and I like to read the debates about it, especially when the states and like the Department of Education and like you know cool the school board members who push back against these people.
I kind of want to bring Amanda back in too, just and hear from both of you on this. Like, why do you think now? I mean, it was interesting for me to read about the history of book bannings, like McCarthy era, the 1980s, Jerry Falwell, Reagan, sort of Christian sort of fundamentalism, and how there's such a fierce escalation, in the last, 2-3 years.
Right.
I'd love to hear from both of you kind of what you think that's about. Um, like why now and what's going on?
I think it's about control. And as Julia pointed out, like, all of my teens, they have one of these.
Yeah.
They can read so many awful but also amazing things on their phones anytime they want. Um, the dangerous material, like the things that parents would horrify parents, like it's all there.
Yeah.
And yet, because we can't control these, we try to control
Oh,
these.
got it.
That's
We're trying to
interesting.
control books because they're physical. You can take a book off the shelf
Mm,
and then you can say, well, now nobody can get to it. Like, never mind. It's an ebook.
Yeah.
It's there. The material is there. It's all accessible online, but it's the illusion of control.
Mhm.
And I think that this fervor of trying to control what teens read is really telling because when I was growing up, my mom said, "These are our family values, and I want you to read in line with our family values." And we had that conversation, and I did because we had that talk. And if there was a book that she wouldn't want me reading, I would skip it. I mean, I've since read a bunch of those books, like as an adult, but like as a teen, we had those conversations, and I acted in accordance with my family's like values, when I was a teenager. And when people say, I want to ban this book so that my kid can't read it, they are outing themselves as somebody who cannot have a conversation with their child, who cannot talk
Mm,
about their goals for them and their family values and the way that they want their family to interact with information. So, it's
mm,
that illusion of control and it's um makes me worry for, the relationships that people have with their kids if they can't just have a conversation.
hmm. Wow, interesting. I remember you saying when I was talking to you earlier, Amanda, that you said, as a librarian, like I'm not a parent. Like that's not my role.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not like you not wanting your kid to read a book means you need to have a conversation with your kid. I talk to parents all the time about having these conversations with your kids, knowing what your kid is reading. Like, we're not saying that you should let your kid have access to every single thing on the planet that they want, though you're certainly allowed to. But like, if you have concerns, talk to your kids. I have the manga and the graphic novel section at the library, and some of the manga, like, we have like stuff from middle school to like older teens. And when I talk to parents, I show them the ratings on the back of those manga, and I say, this is how you can tell the age range that this is appropriate for. And when your kid is reading, you can have a look at this and you can make decisions about, and then have a look through the book and make decisions about, what you want them reading and talk to them about it. Like we're not
Hmm.
encouraging people to not be involved. We're just saying that it's not our place. It's not my place to decide what your kid reads.
Hmm.
That's your family. That's up to you and them.
Hmm.
And that's what we want.
Hmm. Hmm. And Julia, where would you, how, what would you have to say about what's happening now and sort of the surgence of this?
I lived through the Reagan years, and in fact, I was brought up in a Republican, Reagan-loving household. And I'm to the point where I think, as bringing your kids up in a religion, and I was a very cloistered religion. It's a form of brainwashing. I was wholeheartedly a Reaganite until I took a trip to Latin America and got another view of what Reagan was doing in Latin America when I was a Spanish major in college, and it was eye-opening. And I think what we're experiencing now is the rise of the Christian right 2.0 under Trump. And I feel like it's worse because you know, he is so virulent and he is actively courting the moms for liberty. I mean, which is ironic because, you know, certainly he is the most moral president we've ever had. Right? It's all politicking. It's just the culture wars. But it's also shutting down anybody whose viewpoint isn't white, conservative Christian male, honestly. If you
Hmm.
look at the list of the banned books and you look at the themes that they're talking about, you'll see, any divergent, any non-white Christian mainstream viewpoints, those are the books that they're trying to ban. So it's about control, just as Amanda said.
Hmm. Hmm. And I know from reading about it, what's concerning is that once it's challenged, a lot of times these books get sort of taken off the shelves until it goes through the whole process, even though they're not supposed to be taken off the shelves until they get there until the due diligence is completed. But oftentimes the books are just being, you know,
Right.
taken. I mean, are you aware of that?
Right. I mean, that's beyond my
You're,
control. I see that, but it's just as I like to say, there's a lot more like there's a lot more offensive stuff in the Bible than there is in my memoir. There's a lot of
Right.
aberrant sex, there's rape, there's slavery, there's torture, there's all kinds. I mean, you could cherry pick from most any book and find things to be offended about. But, part of being an intelligent, empathetic person is to look at the whole of a story and to understand why people are acting the way they are or feeling the way they did.
Mm-hmm.
It's really reductive and almost childish the way that they're just singling out these passages that offend them and then sensationalizing them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
think
Oh,
it's also a little bit like the idea of book banning is a little bit naive too. The idea that a book is going to influence a teenager to take an action or do a thing. Um,
Right.
the idea that simply reading about the existence of a certain experience is going to, change the entire course of somebody's life and the choices that they make. Like,
Right.
these people believe more in the power of books than I do. Like, if that's the case, because I mean, I can tell you as a teenager, there was a book that was banned that when I was in high school that there was a rumor that if you bought the book, you would go on an FBI watch list. And
Ooh,
that
what
book
book was
was
that?
yeah, right.
The Anarchist Cookbook.
Oh, right.
Oh,
And I wanted to read that book so badly just because they
Right.
told me that I couldn't.
Right.
that's
And
funny.
I did get a hold of somebody had a photocopy the entire book. And
Oh.
I read it cover to cover, and it's been 30 years and I am still not an anarchist. The reason that I sought out that book was because they told me that I couldn't. Oddly enough, my mother did not object to me reading this book. But they told me that I couldn't, so I
Yeah.
obviously wanted to read it. And when I read it, it made not much of a big impression on me.
Right.
I think everything that's in it is easily available on the internet these days.
Yes.
So the cause for furor, the cause for excitement over this book, I do not understand it.
Right.
But I think that this idea that teenagers are going to go out and immediately enact
Mm,
whatever they read in books
Right.
is
mm,
is is silly. Like,
It is.
most of us do not do that.
Right.
So
Right. You're not going to read a book about a gay character and turn gay, or
mm-hmm.
whatever. You
Right.
might come away with a bigger heart.
Right.
I
yeah.
have two teenage daughters, and I wish they would like read banned books. It would be amazing and get off of their phones because that's for
Mm,
me, like you said, that's the danger. It's the TikTok, it's the Instagram. It's like you don't know what they're seeing. Kids are not turning to books to, you know, getting turned on by books. This isn't the Victorian era.
mm-hmm.
So it all goes back to control, as Amanda said. And like she's, and you can like feel good maybe by getting a book yanked off of the school library, but you can't do anything
Mm-hmm.
about what they're seeing on
Right.
their
It's
phones all
so
day.
it's just such an like it sort of captures the sort of idiocy of the
Uh,
issue, like, and just
yeah.
how warped sort of the thinking is around it. Which makes me just so happy that your book is like has a whole nother life as a film. Is
Yeah.
it completed?
No. So the cool thing is I and my teenage daughter, Davia, she's named after David. Her birthday's today. She's turning 16.
Happy birthday.
I know. We flew out to the set in Mississippi and were extras in the movie, which is
Oh, how
great.
fun.
So yeah, I know that was super weird. So yeah, so now it's being edited. But I like to joke with the director. I think the tagline should be disliked the book, then you will hate the movie. Right. So
Oh my God. That's fun. So what were you involved at all in the process, like the screenwriting process, or how did it change the story at all in the
yeah,
translation?
I know. Well, it's going to be a different beast. So I'm part of a writers collective in San Francisco called the San Francisco Writers Grotto.
I've heard of
We're
it.
like 150 like screenwriters, novelists, nonfiction journalists, and the woman who the director is also a member. So she shared drafts with me, and I would give her feedback. She sent me the auditions of the actors. It's been really fun and fulfilling, but it's going to be its own beast. She has her vision of the story. The actors have their visions of the roles. But I mean, it's amazing. I feel completely grateful that, the story will be told.
What can you share at all more about like what has changed when you say it has its own vision or its own sort of thing separate from the book? Like what sort of
Well, I mean, she follows the narrative arc of the book is the same. The events are the same, right? But then there's all of the artsy nuance that you do in filmmaking with the music and where the camera lingers and
mm,
all of that stuff that I haven't seen a final cut yet, so I
I
don't
see.
know.
I see. I see.
Um, and
But
like the actress who plays my mother is Juliette Lewis,
oh my gosh,
and
amazing.
how is she
She's
going to portray my mother?
I
It's gonna
see. I see.
it's
Right.
yeah, I have no idea. Those things are out of my hand.
But when
Anyway.
you read the script, is it very much true to the book?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay.
yeah. Oh totally. She didn't like she added a layer, which is pretty amazing, of kind of a supernatural story element, which kind of brings an additional layer of interest, I think, to this story. But again, she shared all of the drafts with me, and
Well, that's so. Can
it's
you
great.
share anything else about that? Like supernatural, as in,
So she added some scenes from the adult Julia's perspective, and there's this whole theme of remember Florida that David and I would say when things were tough. That someday we're going to turn 18 and we're going to live in Florida, which is so progressive and accepting and diverse. Not. Um, so she has a scene with the adult Julia imagining a young David at the beach. So it's kind of calling
uh,
back to previous experiences. And I think it works well. Yeah.
beautiful. Do you have any idea when it'll be out? Like, does it have a date, a projected date that it'll be out?
Well, it's like publishing. It has to jump through a
Right.
lot of hoops, right? She's, I think, going to try to get it
Sell it.
into different festivals, you
Mm,
know, and then it has to be picked up by a distributor. It's like with books, you're
right.
trying to get the publisher, and it has to go through all these stages before it's loose in the world. So
Yes. Yeah. No, it makes sense. I wasn't sure if a studio was behind it, but it's
it's
completely,
an indie film. It's a
yeah,
completely indie film.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Well, then it's probably going to stay very true to the
Oh
story
yeah.
itself. Yeah. That's the beauty of the doing it independently. Um, so just I wanted to ask you, I mean, from a memoir perspective, as we kind of wrap up here, what having written the book, um, is did it has it changed you at all and just how you hold your history and sort of the loss? Um, talking about your brother, just as it did it help you at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a loss. um, I wrote it because I just wanted there to be a record of his life.
Mhm.
And I was the number one witness to his life. We were the same age from 2 to 20, just growing up and seeing everything that he went through. I wanted, and I wrote it and I didn't care if it got widely published. It was something, like I said earlier, I needed to do. I was gonna like print out the manuscript and like sneak it into a library and just have it on the shelves where maybe somebody would discover it one day. But it's, for whatever reason, luck, the zeitgeist, it did well and it became a New York Times and a London Times bestseller. So I didn't need to sneak it into a library. It made
Mhm.
its way into a lot of hands, and I just am filled with gratitude that people have responded to it in a way that was beyond my imagining.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, I've gotten hate mail. Um,
You
it
do?
kind of they slide into my Facebook messages every now and again. I
Hate.
think from people who have been riled up by the Moms for Liberty
Okay,
group,
so
just because
related to this.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're, like I said, they read like excerpts of like the some of the sexual content out of context. And I just remember I had one the other day from some guy named last name Yoder, which is like a joke in Indiana because everybody's named Yoder, who's like kind of a hick. And it's like, and all it said was like, "You are a nasty woman. How dare you?" And I clicked on his profile, and it's like this like nice looking white guy with his family, right? It's just like, and it just reminded me like you don't know what's lurking under somebody's facade of that, like, you know,
Presentation.
yeah, of like the middle class family where everyone gets along and
Hmm.
are smiling. So anyway, long way to say I'm thrilled that to have written the book, and it's pretty raw. It was my first book. I've written two since then, but I wouldn't change a word,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah, it's still sticking with me as I wrote you.
So, thank you.
Um, and so, I mean, I love hearing that you're grateful and you're happy that you wrote the book and that it's getting out there to a much, I mean, film. It's going to reach even more people, and that there's not this kind of any kind of reluctance in you, like getting these hate, these people
Yeah.
that are sort of out there attacking you or feeling threatened in any way, and that doesn't dominate your thinking at all.
Oh, not at all. I just, they're close-minded individuals who feel threatened by, books like mine, like books on that list. It
Mhm.
just they're revealing themselves for who they are when they
Yeah,
write those hateful emails.
yeah, yeah.
It does not bother me. I just delete.
Delete, delete, delete.
Exactly.
Well, anyway, I really, really appreciate both of you coming today and talking about this from your unique perspectives. And I know I will share with the group, how to be in touch with you, Julia, or follow you on your various um, places. And I know people are asking Amanda how they can connect with you. I feel like can you be out there more with your amazing point of view and voice on behalf of this and
Um,
topic?
So I put our Teenscape's Instagram and the LA Public Library's Instagram in the chat. It's at Teenscape LAPL and at LA Public Library. So I post to both of those. Really, I would advise everybody to get in touch with your local library and support your local librarian. It means so much to us when people tell us that they value what we do, when they tell us that they like a book that's on our shelves because we've picked every one of those books. When people support the library, when they show up for the library, it means a lot. And if you value your freedom to read, your family's freedom to read, your library needs your support. So you can definitely follow us on Instagram. If you're in LA, come visit us. If you're visiting LA, come visit us. But also, if you're not active with your local public library, check in with them and support them.
Hmm,
Yeah.
great. All right, I'm on it. Be doing that
I'm
tomorrow.
going to come visit you when I'm in LA for sure, Amanda. Thank
It's
Oh,
you for
great.
doing
Thank
everything you
you.
do.
Thank you
it's
for writing a memoir. I really appreciate memoirists. Some of my favorite nonfiction books in our collection are memoirs that tell stories that needed to be told, and our teens need to see those books on
Yeah.
the shelves.
Yeah.
So, if you're writing, thank you.
Yeah.
here, here. All right, everybody. Thanks again for coming.
Yeah. Thank you for having us and for the important conversation. This was great. So thank you. And for all you memoirists, best of luck with your projects. And,
Hmm.
you write memoir because you have to, right? You just have to do that, get the story off your chest. So.